So Google made news today by firing the author of that memo that was circulating internally, where he attempted to address some concerns about, the diversity agenda and the equality agenda and matters of equal representation as opposed to merit and truth and productivity. And it was mainly about women. I don't think he even touched on minorities, but he basically just argued that, women are maybe underrepresented in technology because they have different preferences and maybe abilities than men. And that's just a simple fact. As far as I know, that's a very easy fact to defend and a very difficult fact to refute. It's impossible to refute. And so as far as we know, it's absolutely true and correct. And, he got fired for writing that memo that generated so much attention and controversy within Google. There was a huge social justice outcry, and I guess the company felt that they had to respond to that outcry by firing him. And, this is basically a declaration of war in the culture war. Google has been surreptitiously fighting for the other side in the culture war for a long time, but this is the most public and the most dramatic stand they've taken against Western civilization and against truth and against productivity and against justice in favor of political correctness and social justice and feelings and parasitism and lies, and against whites and against males, in favor of underperforming demographics. And, this is a declaration of war, and it's going to provoke escalation, it's going to provoke retaliation, it's going to provoke conflict. And that's a prediction, that's not a threat. But that's what's going to happen because it is intrinsically hostile to Western civilization and to whites and to males and to the interests of white Western males and, to the values and priorities of civilization. Because, you can either have merit or you can have equality. You can't have both. You can either have justice or social justice. You can't have both. You can either have political correctness or truth. You can't have both. They're polar opposites. There's no compromise. There's no cooperation possible on these radically different priorities. Now, why does this stuff happen? Why would a business firm, which is in the business of business, providing products and services, why would a business firm dedicate itself to values that are seemingly so useless and so costly, like equality or diversity or, political correctness or catering to the feelings of, offended underperformers or, entryistic rent-seeking parasites? Why would they cater to that? Well, it's because of something called Conquest's second law. And Conquest's second law states that any organization which is not explicitly right-wing will sooner or later become explicitly left-wing. And the reason this happens is because the left-wing type people, the inferior people, the unequal people, the most unequal people, the least equal people, the inferior, the unproductive, the meritless, the unqualified, the unable, the unwilling, etc., the lazy, the irresponsible, all of these left-wing type people, the parasitic, the duplicitous, the lying, left-wing type people, they favor the equality and the social justice, quite naturally because it's in their self-interest. And they are willing to be a royal pain in the ass if you don't cater to that. And if you don't take their side in that, and if you don't fight their fight for them, they will be a pain in your ass. They will resist. They will retaliate if you don't take their side. And they will resist and retaliate a lot harder than we will for not taking our side, for not taking the side of justice and the side of truth and the side of merit. We won't resist or retaliate as hard for not taking our side as these left-wing parasites will, because they have nothing else to offer. They have no productive skills to offer. They have no productive abilities to contribute. They only have this threat of retaliation to secure these parasitic sinistures, and that's what they use, and that's what they depend on, and they know that their livelihood depends on it, so they will resist and retaliate a lot harder than we will. And that's not going to change. That second law is not going to change. That tendency of large firms and large organizations to go left because they can be terrorized by these left-wing parasites. That's not going to change until we become more costly and more obnoxious than the left-wing parasites, until we start resisting and retaliating a lot harder. And for legal reasons, I would like to point out that I'm talking about all and only legal methods of resistance and retaliation. Things like, boycotts and sanctions, economic competition, maybe challenging them in court, or where legal impediments exist that prevent us from competing economically or challenging them in court, agitating to change the laws to be more in our favor and less hostile to us intrinsically. And so, I'm only advocating legal and peaceful means here to engage in this retaliation and this escalation and resistance. And some people might be tempted to go a lot further than that, and I understand that temptation, but for legal purposes and for liability purposes, I am not advocating or recommending that. I'm advocating and recommending exclusively legal measures. And that's why this law exists, and that's why this tendency exists that we can observe for all organizations to go left unless they are explicitly right-wing. And in addition to that, these firms are trying to cater to the largest possible market and to a global market if possible. And that means catering to the lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominator favors these egalitarian type policies and these egalitarian type ideologies because, they are less equal and they are less able and they have less merit. And so they're more sympathetic to that egalitarian tendency and that egalitarian social justice, redistributionist, parasitic, duplicitous tendency, and they're more sympathetic to that. So if you want to cater to the widest possible market, you have to cater to the lowest common denominator, and that means catering to leftist sensibilities, to inferior people who want to hobble their betters, who want to hamstring their betters, who want to parasitize their betters, and drag them down to their level instead of improving themselves, because in many cases, improving themselves is not an option for these kinds of people. And even where it is an option, it's a huge drag. Okay, so that's why this law is in effect, and it's not going to change until we start resisting and we start retaliating a lot harder than these obnoxious leftist parasites. We have to be more obnoxious and more destructive in more ways. And for the purposes of this video, I'm talking explicitly and specifically about legal ways. Not illegal ways, not violent ways, but just legal, peaceful ways. And I understand some people might be tempted to go farther, but I'm not advocating that. I'm not recommending that. I do understand it, but I'm not advocating or recommending it. I would caution against it. But ultimately, we need to declare war on these organizations, these leftist organizations that are intrinsically hostile to our interests and to our concerns and to our priorities. And we need to replace them with our own, with organizations and firms that are loyal and that cater to our interests and cater to our priorities and cater to our sensibilities and cater to our demographics. All right? And I understand that's not going to happen immediately. It's not going to happen overnight. There are going to be sacrifices that have to be made. You might have to pay more for a product or service. You might have to accept a product or service that doesn't have all the features or benefits that you would like. And I'm not going to do that immediately. And you're not going to do that immediately, even if they existed, and they don't always exist. There are some more right-leaning firms and organizations and companies, the Hobby Lobbies, the Chick-fil-A's, but there aren't enough of them now to provide a full suite of products and services to live your daily life. So I understand it's not going to be immediate, but there are sacrifices have to be made, and there are sacrifices we can make, and there are sacrifices we'll need to be making, and we need to build alternatives, and we need to compete economically. And, we need to rely on our in-group. And we have a strong position there because our in-group is kind of clustered in the middle of the bell curve for intelligence. So, we've got people from the low end to the high end, and we can rely on our people for everything that we need, hypothetically. There are legal impediments to that at the moment, but in principle, there's no reason why we can't get everything we need from our people, from menial services to manufactured products to, technology and knowledge economy products to, law and finance and medicine, and narratives and entertainment and media and all of it. We can do it all for ourselves and for our own people, and we need to start doing that. And, other groups enjoy the ability to do that. Like, just as an example, here in Alaska, where I live, there are native corporations that have a native hiring practice. They prefer to hire members of their own tribes first before they hire anybody else, and they are legally protected in doing that. And anytime there are benefits and privileges and opportunities and rights that other people enjoy that we are not allowed to enjoy, that we are barred from, we need to be agitating for them, or we need to be attacking the other people who enjoy them while we don't. We need to challenge this stuff in the courts. We need to make it too expensive to maintain these double standards. We need to make it too costly to maintain these asymmetrical rules that always work against us and never work for us, because we cannot afford to live under asymmetrical rules, under double standards forever. It will ruin us. It will result in our dispossession and our destruction. Ultimately, it's just a matter of time. We can't afford it. We can't tolerate it. We need to declare war on these standards, on these double standards, on these asymmetrical rules that pose a legal impediment to us, having our own shit when other people can have their own shit. And, we need to start relying on people like us for more, instead of empowering and enriching people who are intrinsically hostile to our interests and even to our existence. We need to rely on people who are friendly to those, who cater to our interests, who cater to our priorities, who cater to our sensibilities. And we need to start building that for ourselves and for our people. And it's not going to happen overnight. I understand there's a bit of hypocrisy here. I'm uploading this on YouTube, which is a Google platform, at the same time that I'm basically calling for legal and economic war against Google. And, I'm not calling for it. They've declared it. They've initiated it. They've fired this shot. They've been sniping for a long time from the sidelines, but here they are throwing in the culture war against Western civilization, against truth, against justice, against whites, against males. And, it's going to provoke a reaction. It's going to provoke a retaliation. And the only thing that's ever going to stop this kind of shit is if we retaliate and react and resist a lot harder than these left-wing parasites, these malicious, lying, duplicitous, left-wing egalitarian parasites that are all unequal and inferior and, come from the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. And, these people are agitators who have nothing better to do than to fuck with everybody. And that's why they can impose these costs and react and retaliate and resist. And we need to be more obnoxious and more destructive than these people, because these ideologies and the firms that practice these ideologies and the organizations that practice these ideologies, we cannot coexist with, we cannot compromise with long term, or we will not survive. There's no coexistence that's possible with these ideologies and with anyone who practices these ideologies. And so we need to be building alternatives, and we need to be patronizing alternatives, and we need to be throwing our money and our business and our support to people who back us up and who serve our interests and who cater to our interests and to our sensibilities and to our values and to our people. So that's what we need to be doing. And, there are going to be sacrifices that have to be made, and I'm not going to make all of those sacrifices right away, and neither are you. It's going to be a long-term project, but we need to start it now, because this war is already underway. And this is a war to the end, to the bitter end. It's not going to diminish. It's not going to attenuate. There's no compromise. There's no settlement. All right? It's a war to the end. All right? There can be only one. Somebody's going to be destroyed. All right? And I want it to be the other people, and I want it to be their firms and their organizations and their businesses and their money that no longer exist, not mine. All right? So, that's kind of what I have to say about that.